soon. On to business now. We start tonight with the conclusion of the two-day BRICS summit in Durban, South Africa. Leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa agreed to pool $100 billion of central bank reserves. Why? Well, it's a bid to guard against another global economic meltdown. Leaders at the 5th Annual Summit also hope to form a development bank to rival the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, but the differences still remain, and a deal was not finalized. Instead, they created a business council, which will have 5 representatives from each country. Leaders hope working groups will meet soon to go over the details of the council.
The idea about this forum is for people to identify their co-partners and businesses and learn from each other. I think the Chinese are wanting to learn from South Africa about the way we do business, and we want to learn from Chinese. And I've seen networking. Every corner of this ICC here in Durban, you see people getting together, talking, networking.
Details need to be created in creating the development bank. Leaders of the BRICS nations are highlighting their success in forming a business council, all in the hopes of boosting trade and investment between the countries. Guy Henderson reports from Durban.
5 years ago, this was a sideshow. Now when these leaders join hands, their counterparts are compelled to listen. And at the first African summit, claims of a breakthrough from the host president.
Following the report from our finance ministers, we are satisfied that the establishment of a new development bank is feasible and viable.
In reality, no final agreement. Some here had been hoping for more. But optimism nonetheless from China's new president on what is his first foreign visit.
The global economic growth rate is slow, and BRICS economic growth is slowing. But that does not mean that BRICS countries' economies are slipping down the slope. On the contrary, the potential of BRICS development is infinite. Industrialization, urbanization, and the spread of IT applications and more agricultural modernization will generate huge energy and will create big market opportunities.
One thing that is now up and running, a permanent BRICS Business Council that could lend momentum to an already changing tide in trade and investment. Eventually, perhaps with no need for the US dollar, though for now just a bilateral agreement, a currency swap between Brazil and China. A raft of other agreements too, including an emergency pool of credit after 70 years, a move away from the institutions of Bretton Woods. This is now a lot more than a talk shop.
The BRICS have been expanding at not a rapid rate, but at a consistent rate. I actually think that what they ended up delivering is quite promising. You don't necessarily want an institution set up without the proper background information, because once institutions are set up, they're not dismantled very easily.
No mention, though, of Syria, despite renewed pressure for a BRICS stance. Clearly, differences remained at this summit, and in some cases on some fundamental issues. But one thing everyone agrees on here is that fundamental changes are underway in the way the global economy is structured, and that these leaders behind me, if they can get it right, if they can come together, have the power to shape them. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Durban.
For more on the summit, Warren Coates joins us here live in the studio, consultant with the International Monetary Fund. He's also a former monetary policy expert with the IMF. Welcome back. Good to see you. The 2 days are over. The original plan was to create this development bank. They've committed roughly $50 billion among the 5 countries. They failed to get a deal done. Why do you think it was so difficult to get the details on a piece of paper for something like that?
I don't think there's a natural bonding between the BRIC countries. They stand out because they're large. Their economies are growing rapidly. They're clearly becoming more important in the world, but they don't have all that much in common other than that between them.
I mean, it's an ambitious plan. I mean, who knows how long it took for the World Bank and the IMF and these other institutions to sort of get that formula right, and someone would argue it's still not right. Why, though? Why the need for another development bank? I guess that's a natural question that a lot of folks may be asking.
Right, and my answer, which may be influenced somewhat by a career with the International Monetary Fund, is that I don't think another institution is needed. Additional development resources can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how they're used and how well they're used, how well they're targeted, whether they're well coordinated with the overall development objectives of the countries receiving it. So additional resources coordinated with the World Bank and the IMF would be welcomed. But a separate institution, I think it's more political than it is economic.
And I want to draw on that because I'm just trying to think outside the box. You know, the IMF, the World Bank, is a very global institution with a lot of partnerships, a lot of people have voices.
Right.
If these 5 countries, the biggest developing countries in the world, get together, it would be more simplistic to get deals done and perhaps a little bit less paperwork, maybe?
Well, China has had a reputation through Africa, especially, of having conditionless aid. If you don't bother having conditions for the aid recipient, then you can dispense with the red tape, so to speak. But I don't think that's a good thing. I think for aid to have a positive impact, it needs to be well coordinated with deep commitment by the recipients to use it well and wisely for the benefit of their people. So I think conditions are important.
In other words, management of the funds and management of the process is going to be very important.
Yes.
If this deal, I know it's premature, but they've got $50 billion, they've got working groups. Let's say in the next 3 to 6 months, they finalize a deal together. What would the impact be to other projects around the world who are also looking for funding as well? Would they have a significant advantage?
It's hard to see, other than the political advantages that they seek from this deal. These countries have grown in importance in the world, and that's not yet reflected in their vote, their quotas, their voice in the IMF or the World Bank. They rightly expect to have those voices enlarged. It's on the table that they will be significantly enlarged as soon as the United States finally agrees to its quota increase. So I think this is in part to push the U.S.
I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit because of your background with the IMF. But if you were advising, there's 5 individuals from the 5 countries, that's 25 folks. If you were advising the 25 people who are supposed to put this plan together,
right,
what would you advise them on as the first step or the first natural hurdle to get over to ensure that the plan is well thought out?
All right, let me skip sort of the organizational aspects of putting together an organization. I have no expertise in that anyway. What I would advise them, and I would hope and think it's their intention, to closely coordinate how they intend to use this aid with existing development strategies and plans generally put together by the World Bank or the Regional Development Bank. The newspaper this morning quoted, I'm not sure whether it was the South African delegate or the Brazilian delegate, to the effect that they had no intention of competing particularly. They wanted to work with and supplement. That would be good, but that means establishing relationships and means of coordinating with the World Bank.
Warren Coates, this story continues. The meeting might be over, but there's a lot more talking to go still. Thank you very much for joining us.